Hi, good people of the internet. Good to have you for this session. My name is Dan Kraft Brown. I'm a filmmaker, writer, director. And today I want us to talk about story. How do we come up with our stories? How do you come up with a script for your film? I'd want to dive deep into the process of how I come up with ideas, where I get my ideas, and how I curate those ideas and make them interesting, believable stories that people go to the cinema to enjoy. Hope you'll have fun. We have different ways and approaches when it comes to storytelling. And mostly we love stories that are current, stories that speak to masses, and stories that a lot of people can relate to. For instance, in our current story, Terrorist, we wanted a story that would resonate very well with young populations, the youth. And so we decided to come up with a story that would speak to this demographic, and one that would resonate with them in terms of character, in terms of content, in terms of the world of the story. Who are the characters in our story? Who's the protagonist? Who's the antagonist? And how best are we going to unravel this story? There are two ways to approach storytelling. One is your story could be character-led. That means the story is emanating from within the character, or the character's inner actions are what unravels the story. Or the story would be plot led. That means the world surrounding the characters is what unravels the story. So the main difference in a nutshell is character-driven stories are, you'd say, the who affects the what. For plot-driven stories, you'd say the what affects the who. So once you figure out your theme, your characters, your world, you go to the structure. The structure is what enables you to unravel stories from the beginning to the end. And the standard structure of a story is usually divided into three acts: Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. In Act 1, that is where you do the setup. That is where you set up your story. In a sense, you give the characters reason to act or react or behave in a certain way, which will determine how their journey goes throughout the story. For instance, if I were to tell a story of a young guy who's a thief, for example, the setup would be either bringing them across money, across an item that would attract their attention, and then they'll conceive that idea of wanting to steal that thing. And the whole aspect of now, the journey of them planning and stealing that thing becomes our premise of the story. Or if you are to tell a story of a prostitute, for instance, what is that thing that would make a normal hood lady decide to leave their house at 12 midnight to go to the streets and sell their bodies? Or if you are to tell a story of a young kid who is at home and they decide to go steal cookies from a cookie jar, what would be the reason that motivates them to want to do that? So that is the setup. That is the premise of the story. It helps you ignite the journey of our characters and keep the world rolling. Secondly, we come to the second act, which is more the confrontational segment, where the setup has already taken course, and now you need to build up the story and flesh it up in a sense so that the journey can make sense and can be exciting and more intriguing. That takes the setup and rolls it to a higher level in terms of stakes, because when you're telling stories, you have to give your characters stakes. What do they have to lose? What do they have to gain? How will they affect the rest of their surrounding in terms of what they have put their focus on, their objectives? So that is all achieved within Act 2. Then lastly, we come to Act 3, which is the resolution point. That is where you solve most of the problems that were set up by Act 1 and they were built up in Act 2. So here you've come to the climax and you're looking for a way out for our actors. If it's that thief who was stealing the young man, how will they end up? Will they be caught? Will they be burnt to death by a mob? Will they meet their Damascus moment and decide to change their ways and become morally upright? If it's for the prostitute, what will happen to them? Will they meet a guy who's a ruthless killer and they get murdered? Will they meet someone who's compassionate and show them empathy and decide to help them change their ways? For the kid, would their mother come walking on them stealing and decide to beat them up? Would their mother decide to talk them into not stealing again? That moment of truth, that turning point, becomes the third and last act, and the turning point of the story, where transformation has to happen for our characters. The way the character starts from the beginning is not the way they end up at the end of the day. The journey has to take them through some transformational aspects, so that by the time we get to the end of the story, we have seen them change over time, whether it's positively or negatively. As much as we are trying to tell a fictional story, a story that is set in an imaginary world, it's anchored on reality, because a lot of the things that the characters go through, or a lot of the activities that inform their journey, are anchored on real life experiences. When I take on a story and I am writing a script for the story, I usually have a ritualistic way of approaching the whole thing. And very first step that I take in my scripting journey is to do research. A lot of research goes into you developing and building a world that is believable, a world that is credible, a world that would excite and attract the attention of the viewer. And largely, it's because you understand what is there in real life, and then you're able to either manipulate or enhance it in a way that is believable but exciting. So in this case of our latest film, Terrorist, I did a lot of research in terms of the hip-hop modern kind of setup, where young people dress in a certain way, young people interact with people in a certain way, whether it's directly in their physical space or indirectly through their online platforms. I had to research and understand what are the shame words people of a certain age use, what are the shame words people of a certain dwelling or community within Nairobi use, because you have to be very aware that different, even within Nairobi, different hoods have different Sheng words. For instance, people in Eastlands don't use the same Sheng that people in Lavington or Westlands use. And if you have decided to give a setting and a certain anchorage to your characters, they have to reflect the actual sense of what people in that type of setting would communicate in terms of language, or how they would dress in terms of look and physique. And so I had to do a lot of research in that sense and understand deeply the ongoings of that demographic and how they maneuver their day-to-day lives. You have the liberty as the scriptwriter to build certain elements that ordinarily wouldn't be a logical stance. It's very important that you have an in-depth understanding of genre, because it will give you the ability to be able to express yourself in a more entertaining and engaging manner in terms of the worlds you create, the characters you create. And you have to be very deliberate and strategic when you're creating these other characters, because most times the mistake a lot of us make as script writers is we give a lot of attention to the main characters. We build them and give them the best of traits in terms of structure as human beings in the story, but then we forget to anchor the support characters in the same way, because they have to be developed in a way that helps them help the main character carry the story, because the main character cannot carry the story in isolation alone and be able to deliver an interesting, credible, believable story. You have to be very strategic in terms of how you design your conflicts, because then that is what will help give stakes to the characters. And these stakes is what will elevate the character's journey and make it thrilling and exciting. Because without the stakes, then even the viewer will not care much about your characters, because what makes audiences root for certain characters is because they believe there's something at stake if the characters don't achieve what their path requires for them to achieve. And that is why you'll see a lot of people even going to an extent of crying for someone they're seeing on screen. And you're like, why are they crying? This is only a movie, it's a script. But then it's because the stakes have been set so high and the conflict has been developed so well to an extent that whoever is watching is part of that experience of what the characters are going through. And so the conflict you design for your characters helps you raise the stakes for your characters, and in essence helps you connect to the viewer in that level. As a script writer, when you're writing a story, you want people to have a takeaway from that story when they're watching a movie. When you watch a certain movie, you leave that cinema hall, or you leave that screen having felt a certain way and even changed your mindset in some sort. The idea is not to become preachy. It's not to try and tell you don't drink, don't smoke, don't fight, don't kill. No, we leave that to the Bible and the 10 Commandments. The idea is for you to self-search and soul-search so that you are able to understand life from a more creative and deeper perspective, so that you make informed decisions in as far as certain topics or themes or happenings in society are concerned. When you're telling stories, it's important to give them human attributes that will have people seeing themselves in these characters, attributes that will have people seeing your story as a true relatable life account, so that you're able to get an audience that relates to your story. And empathy becomes a very core aspect for most of my stories, because they help anchor that character in real life. And so, because even in cases where you have the worst of villains, say you have a murderer, you are supposed to be able as a creative scriptwriter to give these characters attributes that will at one point have them even questioning themselves as to why they are doing what they are doing in this story, as much as they're supposed to be as ruthless as possible. And so it's important when you're creating characters, you give them realistic, believable, credible human traits, and empathy, for me, works magic in that sense. If someone was reading your script, forget about watching, what would you want them to take away from it? If someone is watching your finished script, which has been shot into a film, what do you want the viewer to take home at the end of the day after watching your film. So that end goal, that objective is very important because it's what that will keep you grounded from the beginning of when you're doing the setup. You will know that my objective at the end of the day is to have that thief change. At the end of the day is to have that murderer apprehended. At the end of the day is to have that young kid who is a thief of cookies from the jar to stop stealing and know that they can walk on a righteous path. So once you understand the goal and objective of what your story seeks to achieve, it guides you through. It's like it's a lantern that helps you light your way in darkness, because it will help you define your characters better. It will help you define the stakes of your characters better. It will help you have a clear path and a clear mind of where you are headed and how you will get there. Any ordinary story can be turned into an extraordinary magical story, because you are the only person who can take us to where you want us to go in that imaginary world that you have. The audience doesn't have your script, so they will believe whatever you tell them. So once you have understood the world of script writing and storytelling, you'll be able to take people to very messed up worlds that they will sit down and look back and they will be like, how the hell did that someone think like this? So it's important that you immensely understand what you're trying to do as a scriptwriter, understand the principles of what will guide you to get the best story told, and then go out and tell your story. That is the end of today's session on scripting. I hope you've learned something. I believe I've shared with you lots of what I know, lots of what I have learned over the years of doing this job. A lot of the times we don't learn scripting by reading other people's scripts. We learn it by writing our own scripts. You write and rewrite, make mistakes until you get a hold of what you're looking for in terms of story. So go out there, get that story off your chest, put it on paper, give it to someone to read, and they'll be able to help you make it better. We are open for collaboration. We usually do collaborative writing clinics. If you want to have some help with your story, you can reach out to us, DM us, leave us a comment. Let's come and help you take your story to the next level. I believe the more, the merrier. Writing is a very collaborative venture, and what you see is not what I see. And when we bring our visions together as script writers, as storytellers, we enrich the story and we make it better. So let's keep engaging. Next time we'll explore further in other aspects of storytelling, directing, casting and all, because a film is a compound of elements that come together to form a beautiful, magical story. So hopefully we have helped you onto a beautiful start, because scripting and ideation is the very first instance of storytelling. And let's keep engaging. Until next time.